Thank you all so much for joining us today. Happy Thursday. Nice to see everybody at the Data Science Hangout. If this is your first time here today, so nice to meet you. But thank you all for spending the Thursday with us. If we haven't met yet, I'm Rachel Dempsey. I host the Hangout and lead customer marketing at pos.it. This is our open space to chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries. And so we're here every Thursday at the same time, same place, except the week after next, we'll be at the pos.it conference in Chicago. So we won't have a Hangout that week, but I'm excited to get to meet so many of you there in person. But anyways, if you're watching this recording at some point in the future on YouTube and you are thinking, I want to join them live, you can use the link below and the details to add it to your calendar too. But at the Hangout, we're all dedicated to making this a welcoming environment for everybody. And we love to hear from everyone, no matter your years of experience, titles, industry, or languages that you work in too. And every week I'm joined by a different leader from the community who joins to share their experience and answer questions from you all. And so it is totally okay if you want to just listen in here. Maybe you're on your lunch break or you're kind of having to multitask, but there's always 3 ways you can jump in and ask questions too, or provide your own perspective. So you can raise your hand on Zoom and I'll keep an eye out. You can put questions in the Zoom chat and feel free to just put a little star next to it if it's something you want me to read instead. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously. And Caitlin, if you don't mind sharing that in the chat right now. Oh, Hannah got it already. Awesome. Thank you. But you can ask questions anonymously there as well. But with all that, thanks again so much for joining us. I am so excited to be joined by my co-host today, Colonel Kris Saling, Director of Innovation at U.S. Army Human Resources Command. And Kriss, I'd love to kick things off with maybe having you introduce yourself and sharing a little bit about your role today and something you like to do outside of work too.
No, that sounds good. And thank you so much for that, Rachel. So as you said, I'm the Director of Innovation for U.S. Army Human Resources Command, and everybody always tries to figure out what that is. Like, innovation has become a buzzword. We always talk about innovation theater and everything else. Our job is to be a little bit of a future concept cell for the commanding general so that we can be a little bit more removed from the daily asks and tasks and figure out how we're going to take and update and sometimes transform our processes to get after those future concepts. So I have a team that is predominantly technologists. I have a lot of data scientists. I have a cyber guy, I have a networks guy. I have a human resources, digital transformation subject matter expert, and a recruiting team. And that's just the start of us. We're a year old. And I think we're going to expand by another 10 positions or so this coming year.
That's great. Thank you. And outside of work, what's something you like to do?
I like to cook. So to me, that's my zen. I'll put on some music and I'll go in the kitchen and cook something.
Nice. So I know you said this is a new team here. Can you share a little bit about how the creation of that team came to be and maybe how you work with some other departments across the Army too?
Yeah, no, it really kind of started when I was working in, just for some context, I've been working out of the Army people space for 7 going on 8 years now, which is kind of atypical. But a lot of what we've been doing is digital modernization and transformation. The Army came out with the Army People Strategy, I want to say in 2019 or early 2020, that talked about how we wanted to modernize how we did talent management. Pushed a lot, did a lot of different pilots and prototypes, got a bunch of policies changed, we did some great stuff there, and then realized that we hadn't modernized the mechanisms to actually get us to talent management. We were still basically assigning people and moving people around using the same old systems, and a lot of them really needed to be updated. So we needed a way to look out and see how we could do that cohesively rather than just looking at the individual processes of the directorates. So General Drew made the decision that he was going to establish the innovation cell to solidify our HRC 2030 vision that we have, and to look at how we're going to step forward in our technology and our business practices to achieve it.
I see, Catherine, you had a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in here first?
It was really just a question on whether or not all of the people on your team are in the active duty in the military, or if some of those are also GS positions, or what your team makeup looks like.
Yeah, it's military and civilian. Right now, we're mostly military just because I took my team, I realigned my team that I had for talent management with me, but we've made a couple civilian hires and we're going to make a number of other civilian hires.
So a question I had wanted to ask you about is, Caitlin and I were talking about how you've managed to kind of break silos between the different Army departments and getting people to work together to help achieve the team's vision. And I was just wondering, like, how have you been able to do that? And what tips do you have for some of us who are maybe trying to do the same thing and break silos within our own organizations?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest skills that we harp a lot on command in the military, but that's not the most important leadership skill. One of the most important things that we consider is building coalitions. You know, how do you reach out to your counterparts and get a whole bunch of people crashing together on a common goal or a common understanding? I think one of the places we've had the biggest success with that is with our data literacy program. As we had a lot of people with needs, we had a lot of people who were looking for more data, and we were able to pull people from throughout the Army to look at this as a project and get it scaled up. So now it's part of our professional military education.
Thank you. I think Mike's question there kind of touches on this as well. Mike, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, and actually, I think you answered part of it, but you know, you're as you're building your team, and this is a kind of question that we hear a lot at Data Science Hangout. Did those team members already have data science skills, or are they having to learn as they go?
So I had a mix. One I hired straight out of grad school, out of the Georgetown data science program. Another I hired from Notre Dame, the computer science program. So they had a number of different data skills. They had to, you know, kind of cross-train into other areas of emphasis. Obviously, natural language processing and text string analysis is big when you're in the people space. One of them came in with a lot of those skills. The others are having to learn it. And then I have a couple other folks who were very good statistical analysts, didn't have the same kind of experience in building out some of the applications we were building. So we're using a number of different kind of training programs, upskilling, pair coding to try to get them set on that. Then I do have some folks who come in straight from the HR side, very limited exposure to data and data science. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of test our data literacy training on them to get them to ask more, you know, intelligent data questions. Not that they weren't asking intelligent questions, but there's less translation needed between them and our data folks.
I'm sure
Patrick.
I'll have follow-up questions in a minute, but I'll come back to
Patrick, I see you just put a question in the chat. Want to jump in here?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. It's sort of a follow-up to what you just said, Kriss, and thank you for being here. I'm fascinated by this. You mentioned text analysis and NLP. What are your key data sources for bringing that in to the analytic pipeline, and then also other data sources, more quantitatively focused stuff?
So we use a number of different kind of commercial products. We'll use Hugging Face. We'll use a number of other things you guys are probably familiar with to help us at least kind of break down our taxonomies. But most of the work that we're doing comes from our evaluation entry system, where we are looking at evaluations, we're looking at duty descriptions, we're looking at how we establish our taxonomies and ontologies for job competencies. There are a lot of libraries out there that we could build, but there's not really a spacey library out there for military competency. So we've had to practically build our own. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah,
I know my answer was all over the place.
No, that's awesome, and it's wonderful work y'all are doing. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
And I go back to the conversation about like breaking down silos a bit. Luke had asked in the chat, in such a gigantic operation, how have you been able to actually break down those data silos to get what you need?
So the first step we had to do was convince senior leaders to be directive. I mean, it's horrible to say you think we're going to want to cooperate and share, but nobody wants to cooperate and share their data. So we went to Secretary of the Army and said, I have a directive here that says all the people in the people space will share their people data, period. So it was our first people analytics core directive. We've refreshed that a couple times, and we've identified our person event data environment as kind of being the semi-official repository for that data sharing. We get a lot of people who are working in that environment. It's probably something a lot of you will be familiar with. It's just a massive data warehouse with a virtual machine environment on top of it that we use to drop different data sets in to do different projects. But yeah, no, we had to basically order everybody to share their data.
I'm trying to think how that might translate to some of these
Mhm.
teams here too. Yeah.
Well, it's like, I mean, I think the biggest piece, we talked about building coalitions, there's going to be, we tried to do some data summits
Mhm.
across the Army just to bring people together and talk about what they were working on. And man, it would be really cool if we could just get our hands on, well, there's probably somebody in the room who knows how to get their hands on that data. So we started this little bit of a coalition talking about, wouldn't it be great if we could do all this? And that's how we pitched the argument to leadership to say, look, we've got to get here. We've got to be able to do this. And we need your support and endorsement. Ours was very directive, but I think if you have a leader there who does give you that champion, that support and endorsement, that might be a corollary.
Definitely. Coulter, I see you had a question in the chat. Want to jump in here next?
Sure, yeah, and you actually just kind of answered it, but I was wondering if from your perspective, if you've seen similar data modernization efforts happening either within other commands, I'm thinking of like Futures Command, or even within kind of individual branches within the Army, if there are similar efforts going on.
Oh yeah, no, we've really got it warms my heart data modernization trend. Army Futures Command is a big partner. Their data science division, Nate Parker over there, is a big partner of ours in looking at how we can get more agile data science. I mean, I hate to say agile, not in terms of agile development, but something that'll flex better into our different requirements. So we're working with him and seeing if we can use that instead of our current environment. We've reached out to 18th Airborne Corps, who is using our Vantage program, which is built on Palantir Foundry, to do a lot of their work, a lot of their data work informing decisions. We've worked with the Army AI Integration Center that is now up at Carnegie Mellon. We've got a lot of great partners in the area. At West Point, I can't leave out West Point. Partner and good friend, Colonel Nick Clark, who started our data literacy training program that we've kind of incorporated and taken Army-wide. But yeah, and I think kind of coming back to finding those partners in the coalition, as we figured out who all is working in this space, we've been able to kind of give each other a hand up when people need resources or endorsement, and it's really made things spread faster.
I know we touched on the data literacy program a few times, and I was just curious, like, what does that program look like?
So the initial iteration was just 10 hours of coursework, basically making people better critical consumers of data. Oh, hey, Nate's here. Yes, you've always got your shout out. Making people better critical consumers of data. That's expanded to about a 16-hour course that's going to be in kind of our basic professional military education. There's a second level that they're going to get in that next iteration, which is more hands-on, using the common tools that you have available. We'll start folks out, just doing basic statistical analysis in Excel or whatever they have access to. I want to start introducing them into R and Python so that, it's not scary. We can learn how to code, share some of those resources. So if they're interested or if their branch has opportunities, they go into level 3, which is where we take them into some in-depth analytic training. That walks them through our data competency model. And we basically create learning paths for all the different things that they want to do. If they want to get into different types of coding, if they want to do more NLP, I need more NLP programmers. Yeah, that's always the fun part too, when you talk about NLP with a bunch of data scientists. You know who your natural language program processors are, and then you know who your optimizers are, because they're, wait, what are you talking about nonlinear programs for?
That actually leads me to a question that was asked anonymously, was how much is R or Python used in your organization?
So a majority of our folks are Python users, just because of our Vantage program being built on Foundry, which is PyCharm, PySpark. I've got a couple of folks who do use R fairly regularly, doing their analysis. We had a lot of people on kind of the more legacy programs looking at SPSS and SAS, not to disparage those, but they're expensive. So we want people getting on things where they can more rapidly develop and share. Like my team, we try to use as much of the existing language and share code as much as possible.
Mhm.
But it gets difficult. I think somebody, I see Marlene's comment. I think because somebody brought it up earlier, the sensitive nature of the data that we're working with. I mean, most of our personnel data is unclassified, but it might as well be not SCI secure, compartmentalized information, just because you have the personnel, I'm trying to remember what PII stands for. You have that component of it, you have medical data, you have HIPAA protections, you have legal protections, all these different kind of caveats that go around any kind of a soldier data object you create. So we want people being able to use the tools. Yes, personally identifiable information. Thank you guys. I just had a brain
I had to go look it up too, because I say PII so frequently I forget what the acronym is. Yeah.
Now we speak acronym. It's like we know what it means. I just don't know what it stands for.
It's funny as we're covering some of these questions, we get to a few of the others that are asked in the chat here, but I know on this topic of PII, Sita, you had a question in the chat on highly protected data. Do you want to expand on that with your question?
Sure. Thanks, Kriss, for answering some of that already. But I guess even talking about breaking through these different groups, so different departments, I'm sure, have different things that they consider are protected or secure. So how did you kind of deal with that challenge of trying to be like, these are the kind of tools we've built to ensure security of data within different departments, and to assure that this is not just all going to be shared across every team or every group? And was that challenging for you?
So we really spent a lot of time working on our data governance, our policies, and our protections. And we spent a lot of time building that out in the person event data environment. It's a secure environment. You can't download anything. You can't take anything out of the environment. People get fussy about that because it makes things hard to access, and you've got to request access through a project to certain things. But that, at least, when people are realizing that nobody's going to pull everything into a CSV file or a spreadsheet that's going to be sitting on their desktop, that provides a certain amount of comfort. We also just kind of restricted the access to any kind of identifiable information for a lot of projects unless it's specifically needed. So a lot of the work there can actually be done with de-identified information. And we're trying to add more information back into circulation now, get people more access now that we've kind of done the lockdown. But still, it's always a little bit of a thing we watch.
There are so many great questions piling in here. Marlene, I see you had a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in here?
Oh, sure. Hi, Kriss.
Nice
Thanks
to
for
see you
joining us
again.
today.
Hi.
I know. I'm so sorry, guys. That is over beers. Whoever's going to Posit Conf, we'll talk about my hiatus, but I've missed you all dearly. Even if we've met like for 2 seconds on these chats, just know that you guys are an integral part of my week. So please take a little hug for yourself in that. Anyway, so Kriss, I digress. I'm just kind of interested in, what's like a soft skill that you've started to really appreciate from your team here? Because we always talk a lot about the technical aspect, right? And the skills that are attributed to being a good programmer and or data scientist. But I think there's so much that has to be kind of focused on about what aids in all of that stuff, right? So yeah, what's a soft skill that maybe you've kind of learned to appreciate more and more with your team?
So a lot of it kind of unearthed itself when we were doing our data literacy, and it's teaching. I mean, we have to have people who have the soft skills that support being able to teach. It's like, how can you connect with somebody? How can you kind of empathize with them enough to be able to see where they're coming from with their question? How do you put the process that you're trying to describe or the result you're trying to describe in a accessible context, kind of do those understanding checks? I mean, it sounds very soft in this context, but it's a critical piece of being able to translate our solutions to a decision maker who, if a decision maker can't really use our data or decisions or understand it, it's a tree that fell in the woods. So we've really kind of emphasized that teaching ability.
Yeah, and I think something magical happens. I mean, especially for the rubber ducky programmers, right? When you're explaining a problem to somebody else, I think some magic, yeah, thanks, Libby. Some magic happens there, even for our understanding and or our development of aha moments. So anyway, thanks for that chiming in. I'll pass the baton. Good to see you again, Rachel. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. So nice to see everybody here. I'm scrolling up through some of the questions, and thank you so much to the POS.it team in the background helping me gather everything. But Ralph, I see you asked a question a bit earlier. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, thank you. Morning. So Ralph Asher, I'm a Marine, and just thinking about, my experience in entry-level training, both as a student and as an instructor in that, and it was very industrial, and it was one size fits all. And I was curious if anything that your team's doing is informing that, and even maybe before that in the recruiting environment. Thank you.
Oh, goodness, I could speak on that a lot. I would love to dig into how we structure our professional military education so that it's not the one size fits all. We're thinking, the way we're rolling out the different data competencies, I think is going to help a little bit with that, because one of the things we wanted to do was have all kinds of different levels, all kinds of different learning paths, figure out how to make this accessible and how to make this apply to people's, what were they going to use the most, that we kind of front load that to give them the confidence and competence they need. Sometimes, that's just the conceptual piece of how to ask a good data question. And we workshop with people through what that looks like. There's a lot of data storytelling and how to read, graphs, how to read statistics, how to be a good critical consumer of all of the things that we see in the news. Then we start getting into some of the more hands-on skills. But kind of at your question, in terms of your question, that's something I would like to go after. I think our Combined Arms Center Commander, General Beagle, is going after that, but it's a work in progress.
I see, Alan, you had a question about the different teams working together, and would love to have you ask that next.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. Hi, Kriss. I'm curious. In my experience, it's hard sometimes to be able to sort of celebrate achievements or innovative things that folks on my team do, because there's sensitivity about how much we can share, sometimes even internally, but for sure externally with the broader world of data engineering and data science. And I imagine that's really acute for you, but I don't know if that's the right assumption. I'm curious if you've got ways to sort of manage that and deal with that sort of dilemma of how do you help your team feel like they belong to a community, but keep the right, borders between oversharing and keeping the right level of discretion and sensitivity and stuff.
Yeah, no, that is an excellent question, because one of the things that I've had to do over the past 2, 3, 4 years is be the Army spokesperson for people analytics and how we're using data, how we're modernizing promotions, how we're doing all this stuff. A lot of that is extremely sensitive, and it's hard being able to talk about what we're doing, especially to an expert audience, when we can't go into the nuts and bolts of how we built out the particular program. We've really tried to, put together the nuts and bolts in terms of competencies. We can talk all day about how we use text string analysis to automate the initial screening for command selection now. Don't necessarily tell you the rubric that we're using to judge these things, because we don't want that to necessarily get out. That's kind of a rough example, but we do try to be transparent, and part of being transparent with the force about what they're doing, what we're doing with their data, especially when it's their personal data, is important. I don't know if that's a more of a non-answer, but I kind of tap dance around it. We try to talk about as much as we can.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to know that you've got the same dilemma. And I think I saw Mark pop up the note, that kind of question probably holds for lots of HR analytics stuff, broadly, and it applies for us in areas like R&D and how we solve manufacturing problems and stuff like that as well. It's tricky to figure out that right balance. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. No worries. We do try to kind of come up with mock-up versions of some of the algorithms we use that we can put publicly on Git. So there is a publicly accessible version of the retention prediction model we use, just the base interval forecasting engine out on Git. So the more I think we can develop those, then we also have multi-purpose models, and we can get the community to critique how we put it together in the methodology.
Cool. Thank you.
I imagine that link to that Git example is going to be something people are interested in.
Yeah, as soon as I can, I'll shoot it over to you.
Cool.
You can share it with the group.
Yeah, I can put it up with the recording too. Awesome. Catherine, I know you had a question that kind of touched on what Alan said, but I just wanted to make sure to see if you wanted to expand on that a bit, or if that answered your question too.
My question kind of centers around the fact that this is not a problem unique to the Army or
Mhm.
any, any industry in general, but is there some sort of higher level, like cross-branch innovation for HR people leaders that maybe your team is a part of, or do you share any of that with the Air Force, the Navy, any of those other kinds of military organizations that you might have access to?
Yeah, so we reached out to AFWorks and SoftWorks. A lot of their innovation is not necessarily in how they're building. They do build a lot of prototypes the same way we do for different tools we're trying to roll out. But a lot in the contracting space, we've had to pull in expertise in that. We've talked with the Navy Director of Military Personnel Management. He's very interested in sharing some of the things that they've done for my Navy HR with us and getting a readout on what we've been doing for automating and updating our promotions and performance. We have a lot of, and I think this is probably common everywhere, we have a lot of these little networks built, but it's very unofficial. I don't think you could make a official innovation network, although we are tied in with Defense Innovation Unit and the National Security Innovation Network for some of the things that we're working on. But the rest of it is just kind of point to point. It's a small space we're working in, at least in the DoD side and in the Army side. It's a small enough space that we work in that we kind of know who's working in it. And if we don't know somebody personally who's working on a particular problem, someone in that network does. So we've been lucky.
Thank you. I see there was an anonymous question that said, apart from the NLP that you shared, what are some other typical analysis that you do?
Oops. Lost you for just a second. Can you repeat the last part of that question?
Sorry, the question was, apart from the NLP example, what are some other typical analysis that you do?
Well, one of the programs that we're working on is it's just a big neural net that takes in all our personnel data and rolls out a prediction vector of how likely someone is to attrit from service over time. So we do a lot of retention analysis. We're trying to figure out how to improve on an existing simulation that shows how our distribution could get backed up. We want to try to forecast what our force is going to look like, our force inventory is going to look like over 5 years, because obviously, you probably heard in the news about the recruiting issues. Issues sounds too kind, but I'm on camera, so I'll just say recruiting issues. But that's going to leave a little bit of a trough in the force. Even if we recover from it in the very near future, it's still going to be something that we have to build our inventory around over the next 5-10 years. So we want to be able to take a look at what that looks like and prioritize skill development and assignments accordingly. So we're trying to build some of those forecasting models. Then we're trying to work with a number of different elements. We're working with the Army Software Factory on just getting data shared into applications that'll make it easier for folks to do things like finding childcare, PCS, et cetera. Permanent change of station. I don't want to speak in acronyms.
Thank you very much. Let's see. I feel like I'm firing questions away at you. We have so many great questions. Let's see.
No, they're asking some great stuff. This is fun.
One other. Oh, let's jump over to your question, Deepsha. Do you want to jump in here?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Kriss. I think a lot of it you've already answered, but are there, as you started to build your team, are there success stories that you were able to share with your leadership or other teams that you're trying to get data from to say, like, look what we're capable of if you cooperated to get that momentum and buy-in going?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things we had to do initially, was to show value. I mean, we wanted to find projects that were kind of quick wins that we could say, hey, look how much easier this is to answer with data, and trying to make that business case to leaders. One of the things that we used, I worked for about 2 years on a structure to personnel mismatch program, because we were trying to figure out, with all the rapid changes for Army structure, why did we have a force that looked very different from the structure that we required? And the answer was, obviously the senior leaders can say, I want to build this type of organization. The requirements are built and it takes much longer for the supply to catch up. So as an argument for data-driven talent management, where we look at attribute-based assignment versus, branch and a grade, like, look how much we can reduce the gap in what we have versus what we assign, because we have these skills here. They're just coded under another specialty. If we make some of these positions more immaterial, then we have a lot more assignment options and the ability to fill that talent requirement. So that one was fairly easy. We did it with existing data, existing position analysis. We have much more in-depth understanding of the requirements now. But we were able to show very quickly, it's like, okay, all of these stationing issues that we thought initially were a problem, much less of a problem.
It's a great example. Thank you, Kriss.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I echo Arian's comment. Love the idea of quick wins projects and kind of spending some time thinking about what those could be in our own organizations too. Brad, I see you have your hand raised here. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. A lot of focus is being paid to AI and machine learning and data mesh and data fabric. And those are, I feel like, advanced concepts. XYZ in the alphabet. And if you don't do the ABCs, the XYZs aren't going to turn out very well. Do you guys currently have a platform around either data catalog or governance that helps people find the right data at the right time and the right reason and use it appropriately?
So we've rolled one out. It doesn't have the kind of use that I would like it to have. It's the enterprise EDSC, enterprise data system catalog. So it should have everything registered in it that we have and that we're collecting. And if we could get more people accessing it, I think that would go toward a lot of our problems. The hard part is we're not using the tool directly in with the data systems where that data is stored. So we have to manually update it. But it's something that we've considered. We've identified that as a need. And having it, one of the things I'm looking for is a more intelligent data catalog that we could roll out.
I think this question kind of touches upon this as well, but George asked what systems are you using to share data with people? Is that a different use than what we're talking about now?
And so a lot of it is, point-to-point transfer. We do just, extract, transfer, load. And we've got a number of our systems talking to each other through APIs, but otherwise we just have to figure out all kinds of different ways to get the data sent to the data science environment that we're using. It's not always easy. I mean, we were at the point where they were emailing, or they're not emailing, but where they were physically mailing hard drives. And we're trying to get away from that, obviously.
Yeah. An anonymous question, interesting question on Slido is, how does your team build their own professional portfolios for when they may move on to a new job? Because how can they show what they've done without sharing protected info?
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. And the way I've kind of treated the work my team does, and because I've been in the position I've been in, even though this is a new team, a lot of the team I'm working with was one I worked with for 3.5 years in Army talent management with Army people analytics, and then a couple years prior to that in G1. I treat all my new hires like they're grad students coming in, and they're going to explore the data. They're going to get familiar with the data sets we use, get familiar with the business processes, and then they kind of will find something that works as a thesis project. So like, what is the thing that grabs them? What is the thing that's the most interesting? What's most suited to their capabilities? And we've really kind of built things around that. We've been lucky in that there's been so much to do that we could align people to the projects that they are most interested in. The thing that we're trying to work out is, what happens if we have projects that are prioritized that don't have the same grab. But that's kind of how I have it. I have this whole laundry list of things that I want to get after. And I kind of like, your grad advisor did with their research projects. And like, hey, let me point you in this direction. Go research this a little bit, develop this program or this problem a little bit more. Let's see if that grabs you.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, like the thesis project for new people coming in. And I see there's a conversation kind of happening in the chat as well about adding on to that idea of quick wins. And then Alan, I saw you mention something about how you do onboarding where people can contribute right away. Would you want to jump in here and share that?
Sure. I don't know if I have a ton to add. We just really try conscientiously to think about, as someone's coming onto the team or someone's joining the organization, how do we set them up so that they have something meaningful to contribute as soon as possible, so they don't feel like they're waiting to like become credible for a year before people feel like they can contribute. And so it's just really important to give people ways to feel successful soon. And Kriss, I was also reacting to that sort of incoming grad student kind of approach. I think that's such an interesting model to set that up, to say, like, explore this, find something interesting, dig into it. We'll see if we can make a project out of it. Is really, really cool. And I also appreciate the dilemma of like, okay, we have to prioritize that against the portfolio as well.
No, I like the idea of incorporating the quick wins too, because that's basically the kind of stuff we have that new people could get after. Like this one is, I hate using the term low hanging fruit, but this one's kind of primed, ready to go. Jump on this, chew on it, use it to get familiar with the data, and then we kind of go and develop from there.
Okay, I might need help with this acronym maybe. A Slido question is, how have you navigated OPM requirements as you seek to modernize recruitment and retainment strategies?
Yeah, Office of Personnel Management. So we really just had to get into the same way we did the military side, the letter of the law. It's like, what do these things actually say that we must do, and what is written in DoD or Army policy, or is something that's just more of like a legacy. Like we really try to go back to some of these things and talk about what the ground truth is. We haven't really had much of an issue modernizing, at least on the data side, because of all the direct hire authorities that we have. We've really tried to push also towards doing more with term hires, which scares people in government. They're like, oh, what do you mean they're not going to make this a career? It's like, people who are working in the space don't want to spend a lifetime in the same job anyway. You know, they're going to come in, they're going to do a thing, they're going to pick a next thing. And you can see if that piece is, that particular position is validated at the same level, because the project's mature. You might need some entry level folks, or you might need some folks to do data development and data cleaning. And then after that, you'll realize you've got a different use for that data, different project. The composition of your project team is going to change. So we've really tried to use the most flexible processes we have within the existing policies, but we're not afraid to kind of go up to OSD and say, hey, guys, we might want to rewrite this thing a little bit. Look at what we could do if you rewrite it. Here's our proposed language, just sign.
I noticed in your bio, you talk about your team conducting research and doing experiments to prototype as well. And I was wondering, how do you create that culture where it's okay to do these experiments? And yeah, just love to hear a little bit about that.
Getting leader buy-in, like let's not throw a bunch of money at it. Let's try it first. I can try it for you for free, and you can figure out how much money you want to spend on the result. I mean, some of them, we're looking at different data integration into selection boards. As we are doing that, we just have the board members stay on a couple of extra days, do a quick rundown with them, and pilot some of the new look and feel of the board and see how much it changes their voting from the previous version. And we are looking at things like voter interreliability. We're able to explore things that we haven't been able to explore before. And then we bring the findings back. I mean, again, kind of looking at the quick wins, we find the things that are legit findings, bring those back to senior leaders and go, hey guys, we tested this, but look at all this other stuff we found. There's more experiments. Let's go after this. Let's go ahead and we get them excited about it. We hype it up. And some of it's like, it's not necessarily world changing right from the get-go, but again, kind of the teaching and communicating piece we were talking about before, we got to sell them on like, hey, this is just step one. This is just version one. If we keep developing this, think about what we could do.
I love that messaging. That's great. Caitlin, I see you had a question here in the chat. I was thinking it might be helpful for you to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm Caitlin. I'm a customer success rep here at pos.it, and I work with public sector customers mainly. So I've done a lot of work with Army, different, mainly SOCOM, Special Forces, Operations Command. So that's a little bit about me. But my question was, are there instances of not having enough data, soldier data that, that is, and how currently is HRC collecting that data?
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't want to cut you
I
off.
was gonna add, and just to continue on, like how does your team handle when there's not enough data?
So we have a ton of data, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right data. And as we're going through these models, that was actually what kicked off our assessment program. It's like, I don't have enough in people's files to be able to say what their talent attributes are. And so we go over to our research entities at the Army Research Institute, Army Research Labs, and say, hey, you guys got any kind of existing studies that we can peel a couple things off of and take a look at, and maybe experiment and go collect some more data with you guys on this? And we've had a really good partnership with them on it. It's also allowed them to kind of modernize how they're approaching research, because they've got these things that they can peel off and show quick wins from their findings, rather than it's like this 5-year study that all the leadership is going to change out before it's done. And leadership generally, they generally kind of treat that with distrust.
Kriss, I saw something you had posted on LinkedIn. I think it was maybe like a few days ago about like the importance of being able to take time off and to be fully off during that time. And I saw you were asking some advice to other people from your LinkedIn network too. And was just wondering like what your thoughts are on that and what you're learning from your own network too.
Well, that's kind of the fun part about this network. I love throwing questions out there and just saying, hey guys, I'm human. I do a lot of things right. I've been put in a position because, you can wave your awesome flag all day, but it's also like, I screw up a lot of things. I am horrible at taking time off. I will compulsively go and check things. If not, I've got Mike Carroll, who's our lead for procurement, but he's also my accountability buddy there. He's just like, I see you on Teams, get off, go home. So I love throwing things like that out to the community and just saying, hey, I'm not the only person who's dealing with this. And this is a professional wellness thing that I think all of us can benefit from the discussion on. Let me throw it out there. You guys tell me what works for you. And a lot of it kind of came back that same thing. It's like, we need that time to do an active or inactive recharge. Sometimes it's like doing yoga or cross training when you've been trying to ramp up for a race. You got to do something, but make it something that's not work. So, trying to figure out those good substitutions or those complementary activities. We talked earlier about, what's one of my favorite things to do, not at work. I love hiking, love cooking, love going to the beach. And I think we've got to let ourselves know that not only is it okay to have hobbies, not everything has to be work and hustle, but those things actually complement your ability to refresh, recharge, and do your job. So I think it's hugely important, and I'm always trying to figure out ways to get better at it.
I love that idea of having an accountability buddy too. And like when we see our friends at work are on Slack or on Teams or whatever, when they're supposed to be off, just saying, hey,
it's like, what are you doing here?
Don't
Go away.
message me. Yeah.
Yep. No, my boss is really good at that. General Drew, he'll see me on Teams. He goes, why are you on Teams? Go be with your family. Go away. And so conversely, I'm just like, you better be TDY, boss, because otherwise, why are you calling me?
Right. Mike, I see you had a question in the chat a bit earlier. You want to jump in here?
No, not really, because now my focus is on this paid time off question. So
okay.
I think we should carry on with that thread rather than jump back.
Well, okay. Anybody else have thoughts to share on that? It looks
I see
like
a lot popping up in the chat and resources. Yeah.
Okay, so since you called me out, Rachel, I'll jump. So this is a personal experience, and I agree wholeheartedly that time off should be time away from work. But the kind of personal anecdote is, how many times do I see a quick question? Hey, I've got a quick question on Teams, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can answer that, and it'll only take a couple of minutes, and I'll just help this because that'll unblock that person, right? So you just fire off a quick, oh, this is where you find that thing, right? But the other thing is that if you don't do that, they don't sit there blocked for the 24, 48, 72 week long that you're out of the office. They find the solution themselves. So it's almost like, well, yes, I've been very helpful and I've answered this question quickly, but actually I've taken my brain from doing the thing that I was doing to answering a work question, and then I've got to come back to the kind of out of office brain. It's hard.
I think there's a big part to that too, where it's like a little bit of parking that the wanting to be helpful, but also the, there are lots of people who could do this. There are lots of people who can answer this question, or there are lots of people like in my team. I've got a team of amazing, awesome people who can handle almost like 99.9% of the things out there. It's like, there's a little bit of guilt. Like, am I dumping my work off on somebody else for this time I'm taking off? But at the same time, it's just like, I need to give them the same respect when they go on leave, and no, they're not dumping off their work. I'm helping them carry stuff, or at least kind of put it in a holding pattern until they get back.
I've noticed with taking time off, I can't use that time to read work books either, because then I will be on the beach thinking about like, oh, I should work on this project, or oh, here's an idea, I want to go write it down. But Jonathan, I see you had some thoughts about this in the chat too. You want to jump in? Or you don't have to. You can keep it in the chat too. Oh, okay.
Hi. Yeah, I'm a strong advocate of people being away when they're away, and something that I've noticed, people will use your email inbox as kind of a placeholder for things that they want you to address when you come back. So you come back to an inbox of 350 emails, a mixed bag of things that you need, things that you don't need to see, things that you're copied on just for an FYI. So I put in my out of office explicitly that I'm not responding to anything that's sent while I'm on PTO. And that if people want me to address something, to just delay send it until I get back.
Yeah, delay send is a awesome function.
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that before. I've seen some people's out of office say something about like adding urgent to the subject line, so they know like which emails they need to get to first. Yeah, but delaying sounds better. Let's see. Any other thoughts on this topic before we shift gears? Seth, I see you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, that just got brought up exactly like 5 seconds after I wrote that. But good to know that someone else likes that too.
Great. Well, keep sharing the resources and ideas there in the chat too. When we get to the last 10 minutes here, I want to remind people, if there were questions earlier that we maybe missed in the chat or like a mid conversation, feel free to raise your hand here on Zoom, or maybe even just like copy and paste those questions over just so we see them again there too. But yeah, Caitlin,
the chat's rocking and rolling.
Yeah, we always have a big party there in the chat. Caitlin, I think you had another question a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, are there any like impacts that the Army has changed due to the work with this new team that you have, or maybe people analytics, that team that we see in the Army today that are directly from the work that you were doing?
I think the biggest one is just getting rid of the additional selection boards. I mean, we've taken those, and that's about up to 8 weeks of time where we have a bunch of GOs sitting in a room. It's just like, okay, they're going into an assessment based on this invitation that's going to get the in-depth detail, and they're going to go into interviews. They're going to go into all these things. The file scrub, the automatic kind of scoring of these things that they spent all this time on, they don't need to do that. We can automate that. And we automate it. We validate it with the branches just to make sure it makes sense. We get that human back in the loop, but that's going to free up a ton of time, but it's also uncovered a lot of things that we need to do with performance management. Otherwise, I mean, just kind of the introduction of the two-way market that HRC is using to preference assignments. We're about to pilot a randomized controlled trial for retention incentives using the retention prediction model that we have as kind of an a priori statistical indicator whether or not someone is likely to attrit. And then if they take one of these incentives and sign an additional duty service obligation, we know it's like, okay, that's a win. We can get a statistical lift prediction from these pilots on how likely these different incentives are to keep people. So I think once we get that rolled out, it's going to have a lot of impact, but we're at the point where it's like, we've got the model built, we've got the retention incentives kind of picked. Now it's time to do the experiment.
Great. That's awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing all of these changes happen for the Army. I also actually, for those on the call today, I work part-time for the Texas Army National Guard. So I definitely have like a personal side interest in all the work that Kriss is doing. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Kriss, I thought it might be interesting to learn a little bit more about your own personal journey too, and getting into this role of leading the HRC 2030 vision. And I was wondering, like, was there a specific moment or something that kind of led you to wanting to lead this initiative?
It was an interesting ramp up, because my undergrad was in operations research. I commissioned as an engineer, so I really didn't touch anything until I went back to grad school. I went back to grad school and studied complexity science. So I was doing, rare event simulation, probabilistic design, stuff that doesn't really come into the people enterprise. Went and taught that at West Point for a while. And then my first job as an operations research and systems analyst was working theater security cooperation and building partner capacity, kind of counterterrorism stuff for Indo-PACOM. Then my branch pulled a fast one on me and said, we're going to send you to the Army G1. So like, what are you send me to G1 for? I don't know anything about HR. I don't know. I'm not a personnelist. Okay, well, I guess I better figure this out. And that kind of was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I was the Napoleon's corporal sitting there in the corner going, why do you do this? What is it? This doesn't make sense. Why is this thing here? Why are we using Excel spreadsheets when we've got an environment where you can house all this? Oh, because it doesn't have the data in it. How do I get the data put in it? And it just, this is kind of the culmination of 8 years of curiosity in building things and asking questions and trying to get things simulated and big problems in a space that wasn't really heavy in the data sphere being answered by data. And now we've got Secretary's focus on it. We have a lot of different focuses coming in that are leading us to be more data driven. And when the opportunity came up to not just keep working on it, because I started people analytics and, it's like, all right, I didn't start it completely from scratch. We took the human capital big data program and rolled it up under an existing office that was actually going to make use and figure out how to build some serious models out of some of this data we were using. But I did kind of the same thing when I was at talent management. I built a little startup within there that was churning out all these data products. And to me, this was kind of the opportunity to do the same thing within HRC, is to, sell my other startup to corporate. And I'm going to go over and do this other little startup.
I love, like, just thinking of you asking all those questions there, like, why are we doing it this way? And it's making me think of a question I love to ask people is there a piece of career advice that you've either given or received that you'd like to share with us?
It's a tricky one to give, especially in the Army, where you're like your first 5 to 8 years, it's all about, conformity and compliance. And after that, all of a sudden, they kind of expect you to flip a switch and go, okay, now you're in charge of things, be creative. And there are a lot of people who just kind of get gummed up in the works. They don't know how to do it. I think I tell people to find, we were talking about the hobbies and the other things that we want to do to exercise our creative energy, kind of those opposite mental muscles. And I just tell people to, it's going to sound silly, but, exercise your creative pursuits. Find a way to exercise that creative energy so that, you can keep the brain flexible. Especially if you want to go into spaces like this where it's not charted, it's very ambiguous. There's not a whole lot of, the last 3 jobs I had didn't exist. They were created and I got stuck in them. And there's no book, there's no notes, there's no anything about how to do this particular job. So I had to go out, just like we were talking about before. If you're not there to answer a question, the person's going to go find the answers. So I'm going to go out and talk to other HR professionals and see how they're doing this. I'm going to go talk to other data science professionals and see how they're doing this and put together, kind of a hodgepodge answer to try out and experiment. And this is just a kind of a great place for it. And I saw it pop up in the comments. Data science is a great place to be curious. If I were in my home office, I have a poster of Sherlock Holmes from the movie up behind, because he's always going, data, data, data. I need data. I need to solve problems. I want us to go and, dig into this. I want to solve a case. And I'm going to be a data detective. So it just gets you excited. Find a way to exercise those creative pursuits because they're fun. And I think you'll use those to find that kind of creative fun in your work also.
I love that. Thank you, Kriss. And I can hear the excitement from you as you're explaining that too. I love it.
I love my job. I won't lie.
I know we have a few minutes here, but one other question that was asked anonymously was, how do you stay updated with the latest and greatest tech that you can use and enable your team with?
conversations like this, getting out to, I've made the argument that the Army, because we pulled back on conferences for a while, it's like we need to go to professional conferences. We need to go to industry conferences. We need to go talk to people who are doing this work. We need to go back to school. We need to go do training with industry. We need to be able to go and find the people who are leading the edge and create those networks. So, when we do have a problem and we're like, okay, what is industry doing? Who's leading in this edge? What kind of technology could we take, or what do we need to develop, and how do we do it? That you've got a phone a friend available. And I won't say I'm always the most up to date, and I have a little bit of a pass from the Army just because a lot of our stuff is legacy and it doesn't necessarily take the most cutting edge thing to solve those problems. But I do like knowing what's going on and where the field is going.
Absolutely. We keep a running list of books and recommendations from data science hangout leaders and everybody here. Well, when I say we, Libby is actually the one doing it. So do you have any recommendations for books or things you're reading now we should check out?
I've got a whole laundry list. It's probably been brought up a few times, but if you're doing any kind of transformation and modernization, the Unicorn Project is a must read. I'm reading Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama by Janice Frazier right now. It's about change management and transforming organizations. That's another good one. And I got recommended Jeff Bayer's, I think that's who it's by. It's called Hug Your Haters. And it's about customer experience and customer service. But the reason I love it is it teaches you to actively seek out criticism and critics, and find the people who are just making noise, but also find the ones who have a legitimate complaint and figure out how you can solve their problems for them. So I love that.
Thank you for reminding me of that book. I heard of it like a few months ago and completely forgot. I need to go add that to the list too. Well,
I see lots of good detective books popping up in the chat too. So
yeah, it seems like there's a lot of us here who wanted to be detectives or Sherlock Holmes, Nancy Drew at some point in our life. So it probably has
kind of what
some
we do. We're
relation to
finding
data.
clues.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kriss, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure hearing from you and learning from your experience. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much for letting me join. This is awesome.
Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.